And early on, what happened for Ojibwe people was, as the Europeans brought blankets to the Ojibwe people, the blankets were actually cut, taken apart, and they were woven into other materials. So if you look in the old museum pieces, what you'll see is you'll actually see woven handbags, woven belts, woven arm bags, woven knee bands, and what you'll see is a whole different set of colors, and you'll see a different type of yarn and a different type of fabric that was used. And so you can see this particular type of yarn here is more of a modern yarn. I would probably date that sometime after 1950.
There was also a story one time that I heard that during the Depression days, everything had value to it. And what happened was somebody took a potato sack, actually thread by thread, took it apart and made one of these. So that's how things are valued in those times. So this is one example of our work that's at the museum.
There's a gentleman next community over. His name is White. He's the principal at the LCO school.
Dennis White?
Dennis, thank you. Dennis White. And Dennis is actually a master weaver. And someone told me recently that Dennis has been given some sort of a foundation fellowship of some sort, and they're actually going to be documenting his weaving work, and they're going to be writing a book about him. And so in this way, I guess there's going to be documentation of this particular art form. This art form still lives in our community. The lady I spoke of earlier, Bertha Big John, she taught her daughter-in-law, and her daughter-in-law taught another person. And back in the 70s, here in Lac Flambeau, we had what were called Title VII workshops. It was federal money through the U.S. Department of Education. And at that time, what local people realized was that there were art forms that were in jeopardy. So back in the early 70s, we were actually bringing elders to the table, and they were actually teaching art forms. And so there's a whole generation of elders that learned it from this elder I mentioned, and they are now old people. Some of them are leaving. And the youngest person in our community now that knows the art form, Sheila Labarge, she's my age. She's really not that young, so.
I also know the art form.
Yeah.
I can also do that.
Yeah. So, yeah. My wife learned it. My wife's a little younger than I am. My wife knows it also.
So I'll let Boise explain this one.
Well, my cousin Richard is back here. Richard, you want to raise your hand? My brother Wayne is here. My son, Wajinini, he's here. We have a collective relative, and he was known as Mahomes, and his English name was Bill Valier. And Bill, he was a widely known artist in this part of the world, and he was a skilled carver, a skilled painter. He was actually employed as a commercial artist, and he walked in blood in Europe during World War II. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But as a person, while he was here, he made his living as an artist after he left the Chicago area, came back to the north. And one time we got a story about him in our family. There were people that came to his home, and he had all kinds of artwork laid out there. And the buyers that were visiting were looking at the art, and oh, is this for sale? Is that for sale? And he said, everything's for sale, and you can even have the old lady, he said. But in any event, we had a recent discovery about 6 months ago, and what happened was a very loving person actually had 2 other carvings that were done by Bill, and they depicted Alaskan people. And before my father passed away, I went to my dad and I was asking my father, why in the heck, why would Uncle Bill be carving these Alaskan-looking folks? And what my father told me was that during the Second World War, the Japanese had threatened to invade America via Alaska. And so those of you that are old enough probably remember that. And as a result, there were American troops that were sent to Alaska. And so while Bill was there, he was able to rub elbows with the local tribes up that way. And he actually produced a couple of carvings, and those carvings have returned to the community recently, and we've got them up at the museum. So next time you visit over there, hopefully you'll be able to lay eyes on those. So tremendous work, and I guess what you see here is again today I guess what you'd call this probably in the area of folk art, I guess if you want to call it that. That particular style, but it was a very unique style, and you know, it's a three-dimensional piece, and to look at it straight on. But you know, when you really look at the various angles and the amount of skill it would take to produce a piece like that, it's quite a remarkable piece of work. And so we're very fortunate that we've got these examples of his work still in the community today.
What kind of wood would that did he use?
Well, maybe Dick, you want to?
Basswood.
Basswood.
90% of the stuff he made was with basswood.
Yeah. And basswood is a typical wood that's used by carvers in the community. A lot of the decoys that Jerry carves are also produced from basswood. And the other thing I'll just kind of add on to that is that as in the 20s, as the lake furniture was sold in Lac du Flambeau, as more people came to the Lac du Flambeau area, what happened was already people had visited the West. They visited the great totem pole carvers of the West. And they came now to the north and said, can we have a totem pole? And so what began then was the art form of carving totems. And today there are still surviving examples of these types of carvings that still exist today in Lac du Flambeau. I was down in Parsons. Anybody know where Parsons is? In the Dells? If you ever get an opportunity to visit Parsons in the Dells, there's actually a carving of my mother's grandfather that's there. His name was Bene Wagijik, or Bert Sky. And so from the 20s on through the 50s and up until recent times, some of you may be familiar with George Brown Sr., George Brown Jr., Leonard Brown, Buddy Brown. They were all in that area of totem pole carvers. And so some of Buddy Brown's totem poles, for those of you that visit the casino, you'll see totem pole carvings that are there. And so again, what we call totem poles aren't necessarily an Ojibwe art form, but it was something that was created out of demand. What people want, our artists can create. Okay, let's get there. As soon as I laid eyes on these, I knew immediately, or I thought I knew immediately, the artist responsible for these. But what we've got here is an example of, again, Ojibwe moccasins. These are what we call in our language, Bashkwegano moccasanan. Bashkwegan in Ojibwe is tanned deer hide. Tanned deer hide. And again, what we see here is, as we look at it, originally, Ojibwe people did not have beads. Beads came from where? Anybody know? Where did the traders get them? Where in Europe? I heard it. Yes, ma'am. The Czechs were excellent bead makers. And when the traders put that bead in front of Ojibwe people, guess what the Ojibwe people said? Manidu Manasak. Manidu Manasak means those are spirit berries. Those are spirit berries. That's how it's translated. And if you can imagine, it was an instant love affair, and it continues today. Ojibwe people, we love beads. In our language, they are animate. They are alive beings. Our language is divided into two halves: inanimate objects and animate objects. They are alive. They are alive. And so before the coming of Manidu Manasag Uma, before we had those beads here, the quills, you may have seen some of the quills earlier as you went about. Dyed quills were primarily one of the areas that people use for embellishing and decorating the things that people wore. Just like today, people like to look nice. Long ago, it was the same thing. You know, there were festive occasions, there were important times, maybe someone's going to get married, whatever the case may be. And so there were times that people wanted to look their best. And so again, this is an example of that. And again, what I kind of point out here again is that it's really the crossing of the two worlds. Czechoslovakian beads and Ojibwe buckskin, and the Ojibwe craftsmanship and knowledge that went into producing this distinctive pair of footwear. But again, by using that, again, the beads that are here and the style, each of the tribes throughout North America have their own distinctive footwear. And so there's a number of, and we'll see some of the various styles of footwear that the Ojibwe use.
Do they ever put anything inside to make them stiffer so that when you're walking on rocks it doesn't hurt?
Yeah, that's, I guess in the modern world, what I'll say about the modern world is I know some of the people that dance in powwows, they'll actually sew a sole on the outside of them, or they'll hide that sole on the inside. And yes, that is a possibility, very, very much for people to do that. But again, if you look back, not only just Ojibwe people, but all people, as we came along through time, humans are tough. We're tough things, and people would actually build up that resistance within their feet. In fact, I watched a program the other day on Discovery Channel about these Indians in I think it's Peru. They were running outrageous distances, barefooted. Anybody see that program? Crazy. And but in any event, so yes, that would be done for someone that's a weak individual today.
A tenderfoot.